You're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, where we discuss everything about the hit BBC series, Doctor Who. Today we're discussing the 8th Doctor Big Finish story, The Natural History of Fear. I'm Dom Bettinelli, and joining me as always is Jimmy Akin. Hey, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
Folks, be sure to follow The Secrets of Doctor Who in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, TuneIn in your favorite podcast app, or on the StarQuest YouTube channel, where you should make sure to hit the bell to get notifications after you subscribe. Stick around to the end. We're going to have more of your great listener feedback, and I want to tell you about another show on the StarQuest network I'm sure you'll enjoy called The Secrets of Star Wars. So, and you can find that wherever fine podcasts are found, or at sqpn.com/Star Wars. So, Jimmy, can we get a recap of what happens in The Natural History of Fear?
This week we get a dark, ambitious experimental story. The set-in is the City of Light is Light City in the Divergent universe, and Light City follows the TV trope known as the crapsaccharin world. That is, it's a happy dystopia where happiness and conformity are compulsory, and people aren't always really that happy. Like in the 7th Doctor episode, The Happiness Patrol. We hear the voices of the Doctor, Charlie, and Kariz playing characters who spout state ideology, like questions are bad for the common good, questions lead to answers, answers lead to knowledge, knowledge leads to freedom, freedom leads to dissatisfaction, dissatisfaction leads to unhappiness. The state wants you to be happy. Yet there are signs that something's going wrong with this system. Charlie seems to be remembering things from her travels with the Doctor, and her memories of recent adventures of the Doctor are being used as infotainments to keep people informed and entertained. But the memories have been edited to serve the goals of the state. Periodically, Charlie is taken away to be revised or have her mind edited so that she doesn't remember things she shouldn't. But it turns out that there is a revolution brewing, and the memories of the Doctor and companions are being used by the revolutionaries to help their cause. We focus on a character known as the Editor, who edits people's memories, and the Editor seems to be the Doctor, but he is ruthless and willing to kill people if he can't revise them properly. Ultimately, it turns out that none of the characters are our heroes. The Doctor, Charlie, and Kariz did visit Light City and left their memories, but they departed long ago, and their memories are being used by the Light citizens as part of their eternal civilizational cycle, which deliberately incorporates revolutions, one of which is just coming to its climax now. The end.
So, Jimmy, your overall impression of this one?
Well, I really enjoyed it. It's a 4-parter, so it's 2 hours, and that's a little longer than I typically like to go on stories, and Big Finish is taken to making shorter 1-hour stories. But it for 2 hours long, it's pretty tight. You know, there's a lot going on. It is not wasted audio. It doesn't really get slow at any points. It's pretty intense, and it's, like I said, it's an experimental story, and it's kind of interesting that it comes so close on the heels of Scherzo, which is another experimental story where the audio environment is a big part of what's happening. This is not a particularly linear. I mean, there is a linear narrative running through it, but it is such a tangled narrative with memories and different versions of memories and characters playing different parts as they get revised. It's very complex. One thing I called before the end, not necessarily from the beginning, but actually pretty close to the beginning, is that our characters, so we're hearing Charlie's voice and the Doctor's voice and also Kariz's voice a little bit. Really, the actor who plays Kariz has prominent parts in this, but Kariz is so new as a character, you don't really know his voice yet. And so he's kind of underutilized in this. And it's really kind of bad that this is Kariz's second story and there's so little of him that's noticeable in it. But the story itself is really intense and really creative and really dystopian, and I enjoyed it overall. It was a demanding but rewarding listening experience.
And it was a story that could only be done via audio.
Yeah,
because you just couldn't have this, or in a book, I suppose, because if you had a visual representation, you would know right away that this was not the doctor. And
yeah, they would have at least had to change some stuff on the dialogue level in the final episode. And that's actually what I was going to say, is I picked up quickly that our characters that we're listening to are likely not the real doctor and Charlie and Chris, because the doctor is just too ruthless in this. The way he kills people, it's like, okay, that I don't think they'd really do that with the doctor as a character. I mean, they could, but wow, that's really pushing it. So I thought, this isn't really the doctor. And then they confirmed that in the last episode, where the ultimate mutation of Charlie is talking to the editor and says to him, okay, Charlie you're not the doctor. Charlie was a human. Chris was and she names his species. And the doctor was a Time Lord. How many legs do you have? And he says, well, 8. And so I was like, okay, we've just been listening to a spider who sounds exactly like Paul McGann for 2 hours.
Right. I think that was clever. And it got me, to the end, like that, getting to that point where the doctor is being so ruthless. I kept trying to figure out, why is the doctor like this? Is it just he really is not in control, or and how is the doctor going to feel when he finds out that he's been doing this to people, and then it turns out it's not the doctor at all? It's a good twist. I like that they did that. And all of this is taking place in this alternate universe that started with Scherzo. They've been in the Creed of Cromon, and then this one. In the Creed episode, it's interesting in that it's kind of similar. You have this totalitarian sort of top-down hierarchical society, and maybe I don't know what's coming, so maybe this is a theme of this kind of this universe, that the Doctor and Charlie and now Chris are being shuffled through by this entity that we got introduced to in the last story. So I find that kind of interesting, and I'm looking forward to finding out what's going on here, what's really happening in this instance. Yeah.
Now, one thing that this story has been compared to is George Orwell's novel 1984. And it's an apt comparison, partly because it's a dystopia where everyone is supposed to be happy, but they're not really happy, at least not all the time. And that's like 1984. And the manipulation of history and memory plays a very prominent role in 1984. And here it does too, only it's even more literal. People's memories being manipulated in an even greater way than in 1984. And one of the things that's interesting, they also use some terminology. At first, they start talking about word crime, which is using unauthorized words. But eventually, they mention thought crime, which is a term directly out of 1984.
Right.
One of the things that's interesting here is, and the manipulation of language is a big thing. So in 1984, you have Newspeak, which is a deliberately pared down version of English based on the actually false Sapir-Whorf hypothesis that from linguistics, that the language you use shapes and limits the number of the kinds of thoughts you can think. So the idea is, if we pare down English to just the bare essentials and don't give people the words to express treasonous concepts, then there won't be any treason. Well, that's not how language works. Even if you taboo certain words that are connected with topics you don't want people talking or thinking about, they'll just come up with alternates.
Can I add something? Yeah, There's a very interesting current example of that. You see that in social media today, where it is deemed banned to talk about things like suicide. Like if you say suicide in a video, your algorithm will. So people have,
unaliven.
Yes. So now we say unalive, which is functionally equivalent. We're saying the same thing, conveying the same concept. So yeah, it's kind of fascinating to see that play out.
In this, as the ideology I quoted from in the summary indicates, questions are forbidden. And it's interesting as you go through, noticing how the characters will reflexively start to ask a question, and then they'll stop themselves and come up with a statement that performs the same function. So like at one point, the editor wants to edit Charlie, and he's given a denial message, that's like his access has been blocked to edit this person. And he's the editor. He's supposed to have the authority to edit whoever he wants. And so he says, when he's told access is denied, he says, even to, and that's the start of a question. And he pivots from even to me to state authority for access denial. In other words, tell me who authorized this access denial. And that's a statement. That's a demand. It's not a question. And so you'll regularly see the characters pivot in from a natural question into an alternate demand for information. Yep. And now,
I'm going to coin that phrase and call it reverse Trebecking.
Okay. Yeah. But then every so often, real questions will slip through. And the first time I heard that happen, I thought, oh, is that a write-in flaw? But no, it's not. The characters start talking about how they're actually letting questions slip through. And this is one of the things they debate about. Is it allowed? And under these circumstances, is it allowed? And it becomes a sign of revolution, that someone is starting to think like a revolutionary if they're asking questions. Of course, this is really unrealistic. If you trained children to state information requests from childhood rather than ask questions, they wouldn't have an impulse to ask questions.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't say access is denied even to me. You just naturally say state authorization for access denial.
I wonder though if it has to do with the introduction of Charlie, the Doctors, and Cariz's memories and personalities into the system.
It could be, and now you're headcanon in it, but on its face, it's unrealistic.
Yeah, it is on its face. Although I wonder if that was implied and just not stated, but you're right.
I think that they just didn't think of it. Because even though this is very cleverly written, I don't know that the writer was a linguist, but I have studied linguistics, and there are just different ways you ask questions in different languages. In English, you tend to put a certain kind of pronoun up front of the sentence, and then you raise your voice at the end of the sentence. But in other languages, the rules are completely different. Interestingly, a lot of them do the raise the voice thing, but they don't change the structure of the sentence. They just, all you do is raise your voice. In other languages, you put a particle at the end of the sentence. Like in Mandarin, it's ma. And I may not pronounce that fully properly, but like ni hao is it's not actually it's used as a greeting. It kind of means something like how are you, but it doesn't actually become a literal question unless you say ni hao ma. Yeah. And so if the way you made questions in different languages was you just state the following information, then that's how you'd learn this language growing up. It's just, this is how we do questions. State this information for me, turning it into a command.
And so we have several different roles in the society. You mentioned the editor who edits the memories of people and edits personalities, apparently. You have trustees who are the sort of the Politburo or the Central Committee, and a DJ who's in charge of the infotainment. And it's not just entertainment, it is programming. It is literal programming of those who are listening, and you are required to listen to it a certain amount a day and that sort of thing. And then you have the conscience, who is the police, which I think it's a fascinating idea that they've named the police, the secret police, essentially, the conscience, and the subconscious is like his deputies.
And they're not actually secret police. They're just they're very dominating. But people will call in when something happens that shouldn't. It's like, oh, we better call in the conscience.
Right.
I also like that I think this is intentional. At least I suspect it's intentional, that the assistant to the conscience is the subconscious.
Yeah.
Playing on our own subconsciouses here in the real world, in addition to our conscious minds.
Right. And speaking of the questions and that sort of thing, there was an interesting exchange between the editor and the female, so the Charlie voice and the doctor voice. Mm-hmm. He says, questions are bad for the common good because questions lead to answers lead to knowledge leads to freedom, and freedom leads to dissatisfaction. Dissatisfaction leads to unhappiness, and the state wants you to be happy. The state wants all the citizens to be happy, and it's so insidious when it's put like that, because questions lead to answers, and knowledge is bad. You should just be basically ignorant and happy.
That's their other slogan is happiness through acceptance.
Right.
So you don't want to trouble yourself with trying to figure everything out. It's only going to make you dissatisfied. Just accept, and that'll make you happy. Right.
Or acceptance being functionally ignorant is the other form of it. There's early on the Charlie voice. Just call it Charlie.
By the way, that was another clue to me that that these may not be the real characters, because the Charlie voice and the person who gets revised is serially married to multiple different people in this story. And it's like, I don't think they're going to do that with the real Charlie.
Right. That's true. And you have Charlie. So the first person that Charlie's married to, he's hauled off to be, his memory to be reconstructed. And as he's being hauled away, he has this plaintive cry, "But I love you." And she says, "Very soon, we'll have never met. We'll be happy again." And his response is, "Why?" And that was a very effective emotional beat in this story. Just this, because it sets up the whole rest of the thing. Like, we'll be happy again when we have never met. And he's just like, "Why?" And imagining a husband and wife in that situation.
Yeah, it's a very affected moment. I had the same. I noted that as well, and it's one of several. Charlie, even though she keeps getting her memories edited, she's obviously a looker or something with her 8 legs, because multiple guys have fallen in love with her, and I know. We get the sense not all because of programming.
Well, and so there's at another point, and that's the interesting thing, is she changes. She becomes at another point a nurse, and another point she's leader of the rebellion, and the editor is trying to remind her that she's the leader of the rebellion.
And then she becomes the mother of the future. Right.
And as you said in the recap, the revolution itself is planned, like because it's seen as a way of letting off the pressures, or the steam, the letting off steam of the as the pressures build up, we need to let it out and then rein it back in again, and we can continue on in our dystopian totalitarian environment.
And it's one of a couple of ways this society does that. They also have something called Jubilee Day. Now, most of the days, and we hear this announcement every so often from the voice of Light City saying, "Welcome to your new day. Today is High Productivity Day." But at the end, we hear it say, "Today is," and this is when we get a flashback. We've heard about, but we've only heard about. We haven't heard audio of the doctor and Charlie and Cariz arriving. But in part 4, we finally get a flashback to what really happened when they visited, and not an edited version of it. And on that day, we hear the voice of Light City say, "Welcome to your new day. Today is Jubilee Day." And they've got this Jubilee where people are allowed to ask questions, and they're delighted to ask questions, and they just ask question after question after question. And this is like the festival or the Red Hour in Return of the Archons from Star Trek, where all the things people have been repressing the rest of the quarter, they say, because they apparently have a Jubilee Day every quarter. This is their cheat day where they get to do all the things they couldn't do before.
Right. Or the modern movie series of The Purge, which I haven't seen, but I understand is similar.
Don't know that one.
Concept. It's an interesting idea. This at some points. Well, so just to kind of get to the doctor's the real doctor, during this Jubilee Day, Charlie and Cariz are essentially arrested, and the doctor has to negotiate for their release. And the negotiation is they have to give all of their memories into the system.
It's particularly the doctor's memories as well. Yeah.
Right. And that's what is playing out in these characters that we've been seeing. And because the infotainment, that the broadcasts are edited memories. That's what they're seeing and they're experiencing. But they're edited to take out anything that's subversive, which I can't imagine how they must blackline the doctor's memories. Yeah,
well, and they talk about this a little bit, because they note that the doctor and Charlie and Cariz are travelers, but there's not supposed to be anything outside of Light City. So how are they travelers who've only just arrived in Light City? And they explained this is part of the setup for the revolution. Right. So they don't edit it. They don't edit it so thoroughly as to remove all references, at least not right now. They're allowing some references to slip through to lay the seeds of the rebellion.
There's an interesting complex aspect to the editor where at times he's trying to it seems like he's trying to convince Charlie to launch the rebellion, and other times it seems like he's what he's doing is laying a trap for her, and it's kind of back and forth. And I never really settled on, was he really, which way was he faking? Was he faking being a rebel, or was he faking being for the state? And I never settled on that.
I'd have to listen to it more closely. Of course, it's possible it's both, that he goes back and forth on this. But he's also, and part of that is he's confused about his identity. He thinks he's the doctor until he's told to count his legs. And so it may be that when he's thinking he's the doctor, that maybe sometimes he's on the side of the state, but when his idea that I'm the doctor takes over, he really is a revolutionary.
Right. Yeah. There's and in the end, the tables get turned because Charlie ends up becoming the conscience, or the Charlie voice becomes the conscience, the police, and the doctor / editor becomes the rebel. And I think it's Cariz becomes the editor. So we've switched all the roles around, and there's this violent action that occurs. We're blowing up the screens and killing people. And at first it's supposed to be Charlie, who's the leader of the rebellion, is responsible. But then it gets put on the editor, and he becomes and he's going to be edited. And as we reveal that none of this is real, the new editor has a good line. My job is to act on what is currently real. Which is so insidious. The idea is reality is what we decide it is today at this moment, which, hits a little close to home these days, let's just say.
And the revolution is really gaining ground at the very end. I mean, we duck out in the middle of a revolution, but one of the last things we hear is all of the people chanting, why, demanding to know. And the Charlie voice at the end has a kind of rationale for why and how their civilization works and how they it has these cycles in it that, that, and the cycles are partly guided, but partly free will, but they end up coming back to the same thing over and over again. But you get the sense of, or at least I got the sense of, that's not a guarantee that you're always going to come back.
Right.
Launching a revolution is like starting to roll a snowball down a hill. You don't know exactly where it's going to go.
Well, and especially given it's Doctor Who, introducing that unstable element of the Doctor's personality and memories into the system. We've seen that actually happen before, where the Doctor's introduced into a stable system and it causes it to go haywire. Speaking of stable systems, the artwork for this episode, it features a child spinning top. You have a plunger, you push it down, and the top starts spinning. And they
call it a humming top, which I guess is a British. I guess maybe they make a hum in Britain or something.
Yeah, and they make a remark about it at the beginning. So it's kind of describing it. The spinning top at the acme of its gyration, it becomes so steady and quiet that it doesn't seem to move. And I gather this is somehow an analogy to the story. What do you think the connection is?
Well, I don't know that I took note of that line. What I noticed is they're using, because I wondered too, so like, what is this top doing on the artwork for the episode? Mm-hmm. And it's got pictures of the Doctor and Charlie and Kariz and the TARDIS on the top. And they mention the top early, and then it takes a while before they start to develop it as an element in the story. But it turns out that it's used to hypnotize people as part of the revision process. Right. And so at one point, one of the people that Charlie is married to is a revolutionary, and he's using the top to try to hypnotically awaken her memories of her time with the Doctor. And then later, the Doctor is, the editor knows that the Doctor's memories are key to the revolution. And there's this group called the Restoration Group that has been trying to undo the edits to the Doctor's memories to get the original version of his memories. This is kind of like the Star Wars despecialization group. That takes all the special editions George Lucas made and then try to undo all of the changes he made to recover the original versions of the Star Wars movies. And so they're trying to do that with the Doctor's memories, and the editor, who's, you're not sure which side he's on, but he's after those memories. And he demands to know where they are, and it turns out he's had them the whole time. They're inside the top.
Oh, sort of like the Family of Blood, where they store the Doctor's memories in the watch. In the
watch fob, or fob watch.
Okay. I remember thinking of making that connection. I wondered if the whole steadiness thing is just the idea that this society is going round and round and round and round in this cycle, but because it's going. It's steady. It doesn't appear to be moving.
Well, that's certainly the plan on the part of the designers. I just don't know if that plan's going to hold up, that they're going to be successful in keeping it. Okay, we'll have a revolution and then everything will go back to normal. Well, maybe it won't this time.
And sort of symbolically introducing the Doctor's memories into the top is what messes everything up. So perhaps it's an interesting thought experiment. We'll never get we'll never know. Unless they do another big finish on this, but I doubt it.
This story is perfect the way it is. It would, if you add a sequel, it would only lessen the impact of this story.
It would. I mean, I agree that it's fascinating, and I also kind of agree it was a little long at 2 hours. It could have been a little tighter, but it doesn't drag at all. It just was long.
It's intense. It's 2 hours of intenseness.
Yeah. There was actually an interesting discussion of the difference between Buddhism and Christianity at one point when they're talking about the reincarnation aspect of things. And
they actually explain it pretty well.
Yeah.
Although they also mess it up a little bit, because so the way this starts is after the Doctor, Charlie, and Kariz arrive, either the doctor or Charlie makes a reference to the Dalai Lama. And apparently the TARDIS translation circuit is rendering that literally for Kariz, and he thinks, is that some kind of an animal? Right. And so Charlie explains, no, he's a religious leader. He's the head of Tibetan Buddhism. And she talks about Buddhists believe in reincarnation. And I like that Charlie has, she's from the early 20th century. Yes. From Britain. And they script her dialogue in a way that is not fully politically correct, because she in talking about the Dalai Lama and Tibetan Buddhism, you get the sense she's kind of interested in it, which a lot of people in Great Britain were in her time, even earlier with, Madame Blavatsky and so forth. But she refers to, at one point she says, it's all very pagan. Yes. And okay, that's not a line I would use, but, well, not just because of today, but, but, in part because they don't actually fit the definition of pagan. Right. It was appropriate for this character given her background. And so I like that. That was good writing. But then she explains reincarnation, and she explains the Christian alternative of resurrection. And she acknowledges she's not explaining these as well as she could. And so the doctor steps in to try to explain them. But the mistake they make, they talk about, okay, in both systems, if you live this life and you do what you're supposed to, you'll be rewarded in the next. And in Buddhism, the reward is you get nirvana. Well, that's in the very rare lifetime where you achieve enlightenment, but that's true. Your reward is going to be nirvana. But if you don't learn the lessons, then you reincarnate and you get another chance. And so this is some kind of a metaphor for the overall story we're hearing. Yeah. And I think the idea is you'll get to nirvana if the revolution succeeds, and otherwise you get another chance. And I think that's the metaphor. That's part of why I say that I think that there are hints that this society is not going back to where it was after this revolution. Right. But they talk about how Buddhists believe there's this stable self, and it's like, no, you're confusing Buddhism with Hinduism. In Hinduism, they believe in a soul or an Atman, but the doctrine in Buddhism is Anatman. There is no soul. There is no stable self that perdures between lifetimes. And so they compare reincarnation to two candles, one of which is going out, but with its dying flame, it can light another candle. But they're still two different candles. On the other hand, if you actually read the Bardo Thadal, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, it sounds like there's a stable soul. It uses very survivalistic language. So there's kind of a tension in Tibetan Buddhism and Buddhism more broadly about, well, how does this reincarnation work? Is it a stable self, or is it not a stable self, or it seems inconsistent in different Buddhist sources. Right. Well, I don't expect the doctor to be expert. Good work for radio. Yeah, I was going to say, and I don't expect the doctor to be expert in all Earth religions, but I'm glad that they attempted it and tried to do their best by each one, by Christianity and Buddhism. So that was pretty good. Any other notes on this one, Jimmy? There's a lot that happens. So we can go on and on, but anything else you want to bring? No, I think that pretty much. I think the transformations that we go through with Charlie are very interesting and very effective. The similar, phases we go through with the editor as the doctor are interesting. And having Kariz, he largely plays consciences. He's largely a policeman, but Kariz is just underutilized in this. And partly it's because this is his second story. We don't know his voice yet. We can't just pick it out the way we pick Charlie's and the doctor's out. So I think it's unfortunate that this was his second story. It would have been a lot more meaningful if they had put it later in his run after we've become accustomed to and can pick out his voice and go, wait, this policeman is Kariz.
what's interesting is it's also, frankly, it's the first. It was produced before the Creed of the Chromon, so this was the first work that Conrad Westmass had in the show too. So it might have made even more of a difference by him not having been Chariz before. So excellent. So that is the natural history of fear. We do, as I mentioned, have some feedback, so let's get right into that. On our episode where we discussed the second Doctor's The Seeds of Death, Paul on YouTube writes, "The Ice Warriors was set in the year 3000 AD, not 5000 AD. This story is set in 2040 AD. Zoe will be born in 2049 AD, and The Wheel in Space is set in 2068 AD.
So I assume you got those sources from TARDIS Wiki or from one of the Doctor Who histories of time books that are out there. That information is a lot of this kind of information you get is conjectural, where you'll have people trying to deduce how it all fits together, and then they publish it, and that's true both online and in book form. I have some like histories of the Hooniverse that do exactly this, but when it comes to on-screen stuff, they never establish exactly what year Zoe is born, for example, or what year the Wheel in Space occurs in. We know it's late 21st century, but we don't know exactly when. So just, if you find this info helpful, great. Just a warning that it hasn't been fully canonized on screen, at least.
Stotts42 on YouTube writes, "Word for the day, Marsify. Love it. This was a great story. I never looked at soap suds the same after this one. As a huge fan of Blake 7, I would love it if you guys started a Secrets of Blake's 7. Cheers, gentlemen."
Well, maybe after Secrets of Doctor Who.
I've never seen Blake 7, so it would be very interesting
there's some interesting stuff in it, including Babe and the Butcher. Babe and the Butcher is really amazing. A very young Colin Baker playing a mass murder tyrant.
Oh, wow.
As bombastic as you can get.
Well, he does bombastic pretty well.
Yeah.
Although before Blake 7, we have to do Babylon 5. I mean, it's high on my list. Ted sent in an email. "I got a chance to watch this serial last night and listen to the podcast this morning. When I see a 6-part episode, I usually sigh, but this serial moved along pretty swiftly, especially the early episodes. In the first episode, as soon as I heard the voices, I knew the Ice Warriors were going to be involved. Watching the early classic series, it's interesting to see how they envisioned technology in the future, but I was surprised to see the vacuum tubes, as Dom pointed out. I think that the transistors, integrated circuits, and microchips were a known commodity in 1969. Having a rocket that's been mothballed...
in fact, the first transistor was functional in 1947.
Yeah.
But it hadn't necessarily spread to everybody's home television set yet.
Right. I think it was sort of like quantum computing today. Not everybody... We don't have quantum computers, but we know about it, and probably sci-fi writers would incorporate it into their product. And then he says, having a rocket that's been mothballed ready in a few days was believable, wink, wink. I know, just go with it. One last thing, and Jimmy might be best to answer, was this the first time, and did it set a precedent, that an attractive young companion must wear a white outfit when going through air vents? When I saw that Zoe was wearing white, I knew there was an air vent in her future.
That I don't know, but I do know, and I may have mentioned that Zoe, the actress Wendy Padbury, so liked the white leather suit they had for her that she wanted to take it home and she had to buy it. But then going through the air vents, they had been painted so recently that she got paint from the air vents onto her nice white leather suit.
So then on our fourth Doctor's story, The City of Death, Stotts said on YouTube, "When I saw this posted the other day, I couldn't wait to watch this. Back in the day when we got our first VCR, I recorded each episode from our local PBS station, and I must have watched each episode 5 or 6 times a day. The novelty of having Doctor Who to watch on demand was incredible. Such a great story. Adams's influence is so much fun. When the Doctor addresses the Countess as, 'You're a very beautiful woman,' probably, was hilarious. Obviously, the scene with John Cleese and Eleanor Braun will go down in Who legend. She went on to play in the Sixth Doctor story, Revelation of the Daleks. Side note, Jimmy, this was not Romana's first visit to Earth. That was Stones of Blood. Well,
true. Romana 2's first visit to Earth.
That's right. Chad Bond had a great role in Blake 7 as the brother of Avon's partner, Del Grant. He did a great job in that as well as in the Sixth Doctor's story, Mysterious Planet. Cheers, guys. And then MS1963 is Go via YouTube writes, on a rainy day during a recent disappointing fishing trip, I plonked 3 of my kids, 10, 13, and 15, down in front of the telly to watch City of Death until the rain stopped. I detected a slight groan, but snacks soon distracted them from any negativity. To my delight, the humor was not lost on any of them, nor was the ridiculous, fun, well-paced, inaccurate, Pink Pantherish plot. Duggan was the overall favorite, so was David Halliday, Paka, as the indifferent Borgian soldier with his cold hands. Scaroth's silly cycloptic rubber mask was pure BBC tat, so bad it's good. Having an actor of Julian Glover's caliber made it that much more enjoyable. I almost didn't recognize Catherine Schell as the perceptually blind countess who can't smoke properly. Also, Herman, the violent butler, was well cast. Of course, we all gave our impressions of Professor Theodore Nikolai Kerensky and his chickens, played by the wonderful voice actor David Graham, who went on to his eternal reward a couple weeks ago at the age of 99. So, rest in peace. Apart from some googly eyes at Tom Baker, they were a couple at the time, Tom and Lala's banter really works here. It was also one of the few episodes where I really enjoyed her Romana, as did the kids. She was confident and fun, not petulant or whiny. City of Death is a delightful and ridiculously fun story. Thanks to Douglas Adams, its humor successfully walks the edge, but doesn't trip over it. Tom Baker is reveling in it all, and succeeds, although we think he went too far in later stories. All in all, one of the best Fourth Doctor stories, with great cameos and unforgettable musical themes. As always, thanks so much for the episode. Why do so many companions end up petulant and whiny, or even start that way? It's kind of...
Well, in the old days, it's because they were a lot of the female companions have this problem. It was because they wanted them to be damsels in distress.
Yeah.
And there is also a role for intercharacter conflict on the TARDIS. I was watching a video the other day where they were noting that we don't really get that with Ruby Sunday and the Doctor, and they get along too perfectly. And Ruby never gives him any pushback, and it would be more interesting if she did. And they pointed out how previous companions would do that. You know, Sarah Jane Smith would take pokes at the Fourth Doctor.
Donna certainly.
Donna is, totally does. So did Amy from episode 1 of where Amy appeared. So did Clara. You can have people who are best friends, and that doesn't mean they're all happy all the whole time.
Right. I wonder if the introduction of this second companion in the next season of the 15th Doctor
may do some of that.
May bring some of that. Yeah. Flying Car 100 writes via YouTube, I feel like if this episode was made today, Duggan would have ended up getting a Big Finish special.
He might have, yeah.
Let's get some fan fiction on that.
I mean, Jenny got, her own Big Finish special.
That's right. The Doctor's daughter. And that's all of our feedback. Thank you, everyone. We love getting your feedback. And now we'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create The Secrets of Doctor Who, including Andrew T., Michael H., Martin C., Vicky W., and S.A. Is that Vicky Watley? Maybe. The Doctor's Companion? Probably not. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue The Secrets of Doctor Who and all the shows at StarQuest. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. And we'd also like to thank Zyman Yannick, who edited this episode. So that's it from us this time. What did you think of The Natural History of Fear? Let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com or the Secrets of Doctor Who Facebook page. Send an email to drwho@sqpn.com or visit the StarQuest Discord community at sqpn.com/discord. And you can watch The Secrets of Doctor Who on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/StarQuestMedia. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the Fourth Doctor story, The Creature from the Pit.
Oh.
I always anticipate your reaction to when I announce the next one because I haven't seen any of these, so it's all, I could gear up for it.
Most embarrassing prop ever.
Worse than Chameleon?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, gosh. Well, until then, Jimmy Akin, thank you for joining me and sharing the secrets of Doctor Who.
Thank you, and see you next time.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who on StarQuest. And remember, happiness through acceptance, productivity through happiness.